Your sin always looks worse on somebody else. Hey everybody, this is Pastor Justin Walker with The Whole Truth. And when I say we're going through the entire Bible, I mean we're going through the entire Bible. And when you get to stories like this, you'll see why. We got to read the whole thing so that it can make sense. So let's get right to it. It's Genesis chapter 38, and we're going to do the entire chapter, little bits at a time, but the entire chapter. Look at verse 1 with me. And it came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua. And he married her and went into her. And so she conceived and bore a son. And he called his name She conceived again and bore a son. And she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son. And called his name Shelah. He was at Chezib when she bore him. Okay, so you need to understand that Judah. Now, Judah is the same one. Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. Ready? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob's name becomes Israel. Jacob has 12 sons. His fourth son in the line is Judah. Judah is the one who will one day bring the Messiah. The line of Judah will one day bring the Messiah. We've already talked about all of those things in the past videos. Judah left his brothers after selling Joseph, and now Joseph is going into slavery. We get this little parenthetical chapter where we read about Judah. And Judah leaves his brothers and he goes to somewhere in Canaan. You're not supposed to marry Canaanite people. Well, he is visiting with a friend of his. He's an Adulamite and his name is Hira. Judah is visiting with Hira, sees a Canaanite daughter that he falls in love with. Her name is Shua. And so Judah marries Shua and they begin having children. Well, I mean, at first glance, you might say, what's wrong? He fell in love and he started a family. Well, the problem is that Judah wasn't supposed to marry into the Canaanite family. As a matter of fact, what happens with the Canaanites, remember Canaanites, they came from Ham. Canaanites are idol-worshiping people. They don't worship God. They're idol-worshiping people. God, from what we see in God's perspective, God is calling out a people to himself, a chosen people, a special people. And he had to work on Abraham to get Abraham to go from worshiping idols to worshiping God. He had to work on Israel the same, on Jacob the same. Jacob was a very carnal man, but God had been working on him and drawing Israel to faith. Well, now here's Judah, and Judah goes out and he marries a Canaanite woman. He has 3 children. Well, let's look at the result of that. Here in verse 6, then Judah took a wife for his son his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. The thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Oh my goodness. Now, this is one of those kind of hard to teach moments, and I think you could probably picture why. We start out with Judah gets a wife. That's common of the day, okay? Culture of the day. Judah finds a wife for We don't know what did, but he was such a wicked man that God took him out. By the way, just a quick reminder, yes, God knows exactly what you're doing. Yes, God is paying attention. And yes, there are consequences for your actions. So you should keep that in mind. God took out of the picture. Well, after he takes out of the picture, now that leaves Tamar without a husband. In that culture, in that day, the father-in-law has to find a replacement husband for Tamar. So he says, well, Onan, go and marry Tamar. And that way she can have a child. It was a dishonor to not have children back then. Didn't give her children. And so now Onan was supposed to take that responsibility. Now, you and I, we don't see that. That's weird to us. That's not how we do things in our culture, especially here in Western American society. But trust me, in that day, this was not strange. This was not uncommon. We even see it mentioned all the way up into the time in Jesus' day when some of the Pharisees come to Jesus and they say, well, what happens if a man dies and his brother marries the wife and then he dies and so on until we get to 7 different men who've married the wife? Whose is she in heaven? But Jesus reminds them and says, it's not like that in heaven. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is this is not an uncommon practice for that culture in that day. So Onan marries Tamar, and he goes in and does what a married man should do. He has sexual relations. He has sex with Tamar. But when he gets to the point that he could impregnate her, he, as the Bible says politely, he emits on the floor. He makes sure that he doesn't get her pregnant. Now, I hope that you see the sin in that, because what Onan just did was he used this poor woman. That's what really just happened. He just used this poor woman. This poor woman is doing what's the culture of the day. She's following what her father-in-law, the head of her household, has said. Judah has told her. Remember, Judah left his brothers. So Judah is the head of his own household. And he has his own wife and he has his own kids. And his kids are grown enough to be married. I mean, he's been on his own for 20 years, 25 years, maybe more. And Onan is literally using this woman. Well, that displeases the Lord, and the Lord kills him. So Judah says, Tamar, just remain a widow until my son Shelah is grown, because obviously, the last 2 sons have displeased the Lord. Let's let him get a little bit older so that he won't do something stupid and the Lord doesn't kill him too. I don't want to lose all my sons trying to give you a husband. Well, let's look at what happens next in verse 12. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. Okay, did you catch that? In the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife. So that's Judah's daughter. She died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shears in Timnah, and he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. So Judah and Hira are kind of mourning. Hira is comforting Judah after the death of his daughter. Well, look, and it came to pass, it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which was on the way to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come in to you, for he did not know that it was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, I will send a young goat from the flock. And she said, will you give me a pledge till you send it? And he said, what pledge shall I give you? And she said, your signet, your cord, and your staff that is in your hand. And so he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. Oh my goodness. Tamar just dresses up like a prostitute. Do you see that? That's what just happened. She hears that Judah is on his way up to Timnah. She's obviously upset with Judah because Shelah, the youngest son, has grown up, and Judah never gave Shelah as her husband, or never gave her to be a wife to Shelah. She wanted to follow the custom. She wanted a child. And so she wanted to follow the custom of the day. She had been waiting like she was supposed to do, but Judah wasn't keeping up his end of the bargain. So how does she get back at him? Instead of confronting him, asking him, talking with him, no, none of the above. She takes off her widow's garments. She veils her face. He doesn't know who she is. Not saying that what he did was right, but she makes it so he doesn't know who she is. She veils her face and she goes and positions herself like a prostitute so that Judah would think that she was a prostitute. Obviously, she must have known something of Judah's character to think that he would be willing to purchase a prostitute. Well, what she thought was right, because he does. He comes up to her on the way to Timnah, and on his way up, he sees what he thinks is a prostitute. Can you imagine? I mean, he looks at his Adulamite friend Hira, and he goes, hang on a second. And he goes over to this girl who's all veiled, and he says, what's the price? She says, what do you want to give me? And he says, I'll give you a goat. So she says, will you give me something so that I know that you'll make good on your pledge? And he says, what do you want? And she says, I'll take your signet, that's your ring. I'll take your signet ring, I'll take your cord, and I'll take your staff. And I'll hold them until you make good and pay me with the goat. Well, he agrees. He gets her pregnant. This is his own daughter-in-law, but he doesn't know because she was veiled like a prostitute. The sin is abounding right now. Well, look what happens next. So here we are. We're in verse 20. Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite. Notice Judah didn't take the goat himself. He sends the goat by the hand of his friend to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then she asked the men of the place, saying, "Where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside?" And they said, "There was no harlot in this place." And so he returned to Judah and said, "I cannot find her." Also the men of the place said, "There was no harlot in this place." Then Judah said, "Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed." Let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. In other words, let's not go pursuing her and letting everybody, airing out my business to everybody. She can just keep the ring and the cord and the staff. Okay. And this is what he says. He says, "Lest we be shamed, for I sent the young goat to you I sent the young goat and you have not found her." Verse 24, "And it came to pass 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned." Judah finds out that Tamar is pregnant. Now, why is he mad that Tamar is pregnant? What does he care? He sent her home to her dad. Yes, but he sent her home to her dad, and the custom of the day was she was supposed to wait for Shelah. Judah wasn't making good on his end of the deal. He was supposed to send Shelah to Tamar, but he never did it. So Tamar gets back at him by acting like a prostitute. She prostitutes herself. She had one client in mind, Judah. Judah fell for it. Judah bought her. Judah didn't know that he bought her. So now this whole tangled mess, he finds out she's pregnant and he says, bring her out that she can be burned. What did I say to you in the beginning? Your sin looks worse on someone else. Whenever we see someone else doing the very same thing that we're doing, we recognize how bad it is. A prime example of this is smokers. I have been told 1,000 times over by smokers, never start smoking, yet they stand there smoking. I remember I used to work in a restaurant and I was always irritated that the smokers would go out and take a smoke break. They would go out seemed like every hour they'd go out for 10 minutes and go take a smoke break. And so one time I said, I'm going to take up smoking and that way I can go out there with you guys and take a break every hour. And they all at once, no, don't do it. Don't start smoking. Don't start smoking. It's such a bad habit. Your breath smells. This happens. But yet they all do it. Your sin always looks worse on someone else. Well, he says, bring her out that I'm a burner. In verse 25, she was brought out and she sent to her father-in-law saying, by the man whom these belong, I am with child. And she said, please determine whose these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. He was shamed. She shamed him. She said, here's your stuff. It's you. She pointed it back at him. Was she in the right? Not to play the prostitute, she was not. She did wrong. My mom used to say 2 wrongs don't make a right. But Judah was in the wrong. Judah should have given his son Shelah. Judah should have taught his son to do the right thing and to act in a righteous manner. But instead, he just protected his son from Tamar because he didn't want Shelah to die like Onan had and like had. I know there's a lot of names here, but you get the story, right? I mean, Judah is trying to protect his son, but he's doing wrong by this woman Tamar. Then he ends up buying her as a prostitute, but then he gets mad at her for acting like a prostitute. And so we can just see this is a huge tangled mess, and this is what sin always does. Now, just check this part out in the story, though. Ready in verse 27? Now, it came to pass at that time, at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was when she gave birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on the hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened that as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. So Tamar ends up with 2 children. One is Perez, and the other one is Zerah. And Perez, if you look in Matthew 1 and 3 and Luke 3:33, you see both times Perez. That is the son of Tamar, who was the daughter-in-law of Judah, is in the lineage of Jesus. Over and over again, we will see this as these basically wicked people or sinful people, as Jesus came through the line of sinful and wicked people. Now, that always makes the best point, that Jesus came to save sinners. Jesus didn't come to call the righteous, but the sinner to repentance. Even in his own family tree, there's a history of sinners, and that's who Jesus came to save. And by the way, if you'll believe in him, then you get to be in his family tree. You get to be in the lineage of Jesus, in the heritage of Jesus, not physically, not your mom and your dad, but spiritually. You're in the family of God. You've been grafted into the family, and you're part of his family, even if you've been a sinner. That's exactly who he came to save. As a matter of fact, I would say especially if you've been a sinner, you're exactly who he came to save. That's what Jesus came to do, was save sinners from their sin, even when they're pretty atrocious. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow with more of Genesis, and we'll be in chapter 39. See you then.